Hello everyone, Drinky130 here from the Volcano Wolves, coming at you with a theory about one specific character's voice lines, and that being Mr. Hippo. Because in one of his voice lines, he actually mentions, a father bringing his son over to a bakery to give him to get bread. But in any manner, the father and the son stands for probably William Afton and the Crying Child going to Fredbear's family diner. And the sourdough bread that he mentions in his story means the yellow bunny suit, or spring bonnie suit, as I like to think. Then a third thing is that the duck population is the children that he likes to kill. And Mr. Hippo is acting sort of like the puppet, trying to stop William Afton from killing the ducks, which is the children from FNAF. And I really like to think this, and I really like to think I'm correct about this. So, we're going to check out another one, and I'm going to get y'all's opinions on it. So, let's just get over the elephant up. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on, you Orville. Because everyone pays attention to the whispering. Everyone pays attention to the whispering that the other mediocre melodies do. But they don't pay attention to this guy.
Well, it seems that your journey has ended. Very sorry about that. It was always going to end this way, of course. If it weren't by me, it would have just been by some other, terrible thing. Just, you could not imagine how terrible it would be. Just, I get scared thinking about it. Glad it's not me. It reminds me of a time I was speaking to my good friend Orville. We were sitting on a park bench watching the pigeons. I was on the left, he was on the... Wait, was I on the right or left? Anyways, it doesn't matter. We were sitting on there watching the pigeons. And I said to Orville, "Friend, those birds are frozen." And he kind of looked at me like I lost my mind. But I reminded him that it was winter, and often birds will sit in a tree until they freeze. Then they sort of fall to the ground until the sun warms up and they can, move around again. So I said to Orville, "You might as well save those breadcrumbs until the birds thaw, because they can't very well enjoy them in the condition they're in." To which he asked what I meant, and asking what condition the crumbs should be in before he threw them to the birds, assuming that I meant the birds couldn't enjoy the breadcrumbs in the condition that the crumbs were in, when in fact I had meant the birds could not enjoy them in the condition that the birds were in, considering that the birds were frozen. So he took a moment and then threw his last handful onto the ground. I said to him, "Orville, why did you throw the breadcrumbs to the birds when I just told you they're frozen?" To which he responded, "The breadcrumbs are not frozen." Again, misunderstanding my words. I didn't mean to say that the breadcrumbs were frozen when I said I told you they're frozen. I'd been referring to the birds. In hindsight, what I should have said was, and this would make perfect sense, "Why did you throw the breadcrumbs to the birds when the birds are frozen?" He misunderstood upon my correction, stating that he didn't know what else to do with the breadcrumbs, and that perhaps, when the birds thawed, they'd still be able to eat the crumbs. So I said to Orville, and this is what I said to him, I said, "Orville, the birds may be dead."
Okay, so what I think by that line of of Mr. Hippo is that I think he is talking about the misconception of times when FNAF 4 was out. Because every theorist was saying that it was the bite of 1987, but Scott Cawthon meant to where it was 1983. So he tried to clear up the misconception, and still the people are still trying to say it's 1987. I think that's what Scott Cawthon meant by putting this in the story. So let's look at one more story, and then I'll be off. I'm just trying to tell y'all that his stories do actually mean something, but don't add much to the storyline. Come on, Orville. We need to listen to story. Let's go to piracy. And I'll just send him over here. Come over. Come on. Come over. And dead.
My friend, you have met a terrible, terrible demise. But, I don't feel too bad about it. After all, if it weren't from me, it would have just been from someone else, I guess what I'm trying to say is life goes on. Well, for everyone else, life goes on, not for you. You're dead. That's neither here nor there. It reminds me of one summer day in the park. I was having just a delightful picnic with my good friend Orville. And I said to him, Orville, I have a story. And he said to me, what's the significance of the story? And I said to him, Orville, not every story has to have significance, Sometimes a story is just a story. You try to read into every little thing and find meaning in everything anyone says, you'll just drive yourself crazy. I had a friend do it once. Wasn't pretty. We talked about it for years. And not only that, but you'll likely end up believing something you shouldn't believe, thinking something you shouldn't think, or assuming something you shouldn't assume. Sometimes, I said, a story is just a story. So just be quiet for 1 second of your life and eat your sandwich, okay? Of course, it was only then I realized I'd made sandwiches. Poor Orville was having such difficulty eating it. Elephants have those clumsy hands, Actually, I suppose that's the problem. They don't have hands at all, do they? They're all feet. I couldn't imagine someone asking me to eat a sandwich with my feet. Now, if I recall correctly, there was a bakery nearby. I said to him, Orville, let me go get you some rye bread. Now, I'm unsure if elephants enjoy rye bread, but I assure you that Orville does. Now, this was on a Tuesday, which was good because rye bread was always fresh on Tuesday. They made sourdough bread on Monday and threw it out Wednesday, or rather, they sold it at a discount for people wanting to feed the ducks, and then probably at the end of the day, finally, they threw it all out. I don't recall. I do remember a man who would bring his son to the bakery every Wednesday and then go feed the ducks. He would buy all of the sourdough bread. Of course, you're not supposed to feed the ducks sourdough bread at all. It swells up in their stomach and then they all die. At least that's what I've heard. I never saw any ducks die myself, but I did notice a substantial decrease in the duck population over the course of a few years. I just never thought to stop the man and tell him that he was killing the ducks by feeding them sourdough bread. And if you want my opinion on the matter, and I told Orville this as well, if you want to feed ducks, or birds, or any kind for that matter, it's best to buy seed. I mean, when you think about it, breads of any sort don't occur in nature. They don't grow on trees or spring up from the bushes. I don't think birds know what to do with bread. What was I saying? Oh, yes. So I bought Orville some rye bread. What a fine day it was.
Okay, since I already talked about that story, the story that I told, I'm going to tell you about the beginning. So, it was Mr. Hippo trying to say to Orville that he had a story, but but Orville said, what was the meaning? Well, I think this is directly correlating to Mr. Hippo, being like Scott Cawthon, and Orville being the theorist. Mr. Hippo is trying to give FNAF a story that you don't have to pick up every bit and crumb of everything you see, like honking Freddy's nose somehow correlates to Golden Freddy being a weird beeping clock. I mean, you know what I mean? So he's just trying to say that you don't have to look at every detail and say that it's a good plot to the story. Like, can't look at the show stage of FNAF 1's Cloud and say, hey, that's important. Or, like, in the Custom Night Surprise Corner, there's a lot of Chicas. Doesn't mean that Chica is God trying to say that he's very good in Chica. Chica is important to the story. He's just trying to say that not every detail of everything in the story, or the games, in that matter, is important. And about the sandwich part, I feel like he's saying that not every theorist had like grasp on the story, and more like it's just down at their feet. But, you know, ask in the comments what you think the stories of Mr. Hippo are all about, since I only really did 2. But that's sort of what I was going to talk about. So everyone been talking about like these 3 contestants with babies' voice lines behind them, but they never talk about Mr. Hippo's stories. I sort of analyzed it into where it sort of makes a little bit more sense. So I hope you all enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell to never ever miss a single video ever. Bye bye.